So I'm the head of sound recording at the school, and I'm just going to put my prop down because I don't feel very happy without a prop. When I was invited to come and speak to you lucky people, I was asked to give a title for the talk, and I like alliteration, so it's Listening for a Living, which is basically what I do. I used that Listening for a Living title in an interview I did with a sound recordist friend of mine, a wildlife sound recordist. I wrote up in a magazine. I called that Listening for a Living. I went on his website, and he's now claiming that phrase, but I wanted to tell you I thought of it first. So, why am I here? My name is Simon Clark. I'm a location sound recordist, and that doesn't make me a bad person. It's all I've ever wanted to do. I was hooked on the process of recording and reproducing sound from the age of 10. TV at the time was black and white, and the English were good at football. And my father brought home a thing called a reel-to-reel tape recorder, which they don't really exist anymore, but that's how we recorded sound. A reel of tape, a plastic reel that took up that, and they went round and round and round. You could see them. It looked a little bit like cassette machines, but the reels were out in the open. He brought one of those home. My big brother showed me that you could press a button and you could speak into it, and then you could press another button and the reels went round and round and round, and then your voice came back out, and that was me gone. That was absolutely the only thing I wanted to do my entire life, and it's pretty much the only thing I have done with my entire life. I started off professionally in post-production sound. So post-production sound is the process that happens after you've made the film. We've all gone out and we've used these things. We'll talk about those in a moment. Suspicious-looking object. And you've made the film, you've filmed it with the actors, etc., etc. And post-production people are the people who sit in a dark, air-conditioned room in front of a screen, and they manicure the sound. They nip it and tuck it and make it all into a beautiful thing. Their skin is blue. They never see the sun. Their throats are kind of dry because they live in an air-conditioned environment, and I thought, after a while, that ain't for me. So I decided what I wanted to do was see the world and go outside and become what we call a location sound recordist. And I did that in the 1980s. For those of you who want to know about the 1980s, that was the last century. And that's a very strange experience having to say that, but it was. That's the last century that I was doing that in. Since the 1990s, I've been working almost exclusively on TV dramas, but previous to that, I was working on documentaries. And now, here I am at the head of location sound at the NFTS, which is a fantastic job. I've actually discovered that I rather like teaching, and I rather like my students. And I have learnt that it's not a one-way street. It's not just me teaching them. What I find is that every week when I go into the NFTS, I end up learning something from one of them. Because the medium that I want to talk to you about now, media, broadcasting, film, recording, radio, and specifically sound recording, is evolving all the time. And it's evolving faster, I'm not allowed to swear in here, than old people like me can keep up with. The technology is moving very, very fast. This thing, and I'm only going to walk around it a couple of times, but I've got to do this because I just know that when they show this on the web or wherever it goes, it looks an awful lot better if you actually use this kind of technology and you do that kind of thing. That kind of thing has only been around for a couple of years. I've been around for an awful long time, and that is very new to me. And in fact, my students are going to be involved in a VR project at the end of this month. And we're having to invent the technology to make that thing work for sound. And that's actually incredibly exciting. It's it's exciting to me anyway. I'm just going to define sound for us, because I think that's kind of important. So let's do the definition, the first definition that they get when they come to the National Film and Television School. I'm going to have to read it out to you. Sound is the alternate regions of high and low pressure, or compressions and rarefactions, produced in the molecules of the transmitting medium, which in our case is usually air. And these rarefactions and compressions travel away from the sound source as the sound source vibrates within a narrow range of frequencies which we, as human beings, can detect and resolve. Got it? Happy? I'll tell you exactly what I think sound is. I think it's a magical thing of beauty. I think it's a thing of fascination. I think it's the best transport medium for communication that we have. It's the best transport medium for emotion, for intimacy, and for understanding. There's a wonderful woman called Dame Evelyn Glennie, who is, ironically, partially deaf. But she's a percussionist. She can hear a little bit, and she went deaf, I think, aged about 11. And she says, at the moment you are speaking to somebody, they are the most important person in your life. Which is a fairly profound thing to think. That can only happen through sound. Sound is my obsession. I would say I've got something of a fetish for capturing it and then replaying it so I can experience it over and over again. Sound recordists, which is what I still am, I still do that job, are on film and TV crews, have a reputation for being slightly socially challenged weirdos with unkempt hair, or in my case, no hair. We wear Jesus sandals with socks. We have a penchant for real ales with embarrassing names. And we whinge constantly. Joke from a crew. What's the difference between a sound recordist and the lighting generator? And the answer is the generator stops whining at the end of the day. We're thought of having no small talk. People think that we are fairly socially awkward because we're a bit geeky. We're a little bit into all the technology, and we have fantastic chat-up lines like, did you know that the Shaw Air SM-57 has been used by every United States president from Lyndon Baines Johnson on, and the same model was used by Michael Jackson when recording the lead vocals for the song Billie Jean? You all want to come home with me now, don't you? And you recognise us on the set because we're the ones sat on our own, and the dead giveaways the pair of headphones and this sort of 1,000-yard stare that we've all got. I'm not really in the room with you. And it's not boredom. The stare's a mark of a person who is inhabiting a world that you aren't often aware of. You put those cans, as we call them, over your ears, and you're removed from the real world, and you get immersed in this new one, which is, I have to say, as full of nightmares as it is of beauty. The sound department's favourite joke is that if you take 70 as being a fair number of people involved in making a film or a television programme, and this is drama, we'll talk about documentary in a minute, that works out as 67 people looking after a beautiful, perfect picture, and 3 of us doing the other 50% of the work. It's not quite true, but it sort of illustrates the fact that the sound team, sound recordists, people who look after sound, are in a minority. I said this is listening for a living. Now, the thing is that everybody who has medically the ability to do it, everybody can hear. I pretty much hope that everybody in this room can hear. Very few people actually listen. And that's what we have to do. We have to listen, we have to deconstruct what we hear, we have to be very, very aware of it, and we have to understand how to capture bits of it using various tools of the trade. However, when I have a trainee or an assistant who comes to work for me, one of the first things that I tend to tell them is, but I don't actually care if you understand the finer points of psychoacoustics. I don't actually care if you can use every piece of software in the world, from Pro Tools to Ableton Live to whatever. That doesn't really bother me. I can teach you all of that stuff as we go along, or preferably because you came to us at the NFTS and you learnt it in the first place. My main concern with people who work in sound is how they interact with other people, how they get on with people, how they work with other members of the crew. The thing about all of us in a film and television film crew, whether it's documentary, reality, game show, or drama, is we are all storytellers. That's what we want to do. We may do it in different ways. Some people do it behind a camera. There are 8 of them here doing that behind a camera. And I notice there's nobody doing sound. However, we are all telling stories. And if you like telling stories, a fantastic way of getting involved in storytelling is actually to be at the medium which tells more stories than any other medium in the world at the moment. And that is the world of audio-visual, if you want to call it. It can be on the web, it can be on the TV, it can be on the cinema screen, you can be downloading it, you can... there used to be these shiny things called discs, they were DVDs, you wouldn't know about those, but anyway, that's another way of doing it. If you want to get involved with storytelling, this is a fantastic business to actually be involved with. And the thing about it is that we need people like yourselves, because you've only got to look at the raddled old body here, and you've got to realise there isn't much life left in it, and things are moving at a pace, and we've got VR and we've got all the other things. We need people like you to come and replace us. As the technology moves on, we're going to rewrite the rules. When I was a young lad, we actually rewrote the rules much to the consternation of the older generation. We did things slightly differently. We edited an awful lot faster. We did things called overlapping dialogue, when people speak at the same time, which, believe it or not, nobody did up until around about the year 1999 in film and television. If somebody had to interrupt somebody else, then the sound recordist would put his hand up and say, "Nope, you can't do that." So the first person has to sound as if they're going to be interrupted, and then they have to pause, and then the next person, after a little bit of a pause, has to sound as if they're interrupting that person, and then the editor's going to take the two things and put them over the top of each other. And that may not sound like a massive thing to do, but when we said, no, we can do that in the field, we can have everybody talking at the same time, the generation above us got fairly cross with it. There were some elderly editors who used to get the material that we'd shot, and they got fairly cross with us. But we moved things on. And that's what, hopefully, you guys are going to do when, I hope, you come and join the NFTS and make yourself into the technicians of the future. I'm going to tell you a little tiny bit about my story then, just so that we can cover all the various bits of what sound recording can be. So when I went in the 1980s, I decided I was going to be a sound recordist, location sound recordist. I went into documentary. Now, I made an appalling hash of my education, which, thank goodness, you guys are not doing. You're going the right way about this, but in the 1970s, which is when I started, and then the 1980s, the film and television industry, although it was always been a very, very professional thing, education within film and TV was pretty ad hoc. Actually, we didn't really have it. Where I work now, the National Film and Television School didn't actually start until 1971, and when it did start, it was frowned upon. It was quite a revolutionary thing, and they had 25 students. And we've got something in the order of 300 now, and we're getting bigger, but there you go. I decided that I was going to go into this world, and I ended up getting my education whilst I was doing my work, which is kind of a weird way of doing it. So I made a hash of the education. I got kicked out of school with 5 O-levels. I'm not proud of that. I'm just telling you that because this is the route that I had to take, and this is why I'm going to persuade you to come to the NFTS, I hope. Documentaries became my higher education. I, over the course of 10 years, visited just about the majority of countries on this planet. I had a passport that was that thick. I roamed all over places that the general public never got to actually see or have access to. I met fascinating people, some of them world experts in their fields, who would then, because that's what world experts do, explain things to you at great length. I can tell you an awful lot about things like paper reclamation and strange things like that, which not that interesting. We got famous artists and musicians, because artists and musicians want to perform, they want to show you what they create, so they would do it for us in the room very intimately, and at the same time I got to climb the world's tallest waterfall. I whitewater rafted through the Venezuelan rainforest, although I couldn't actually swim when I did that, so it was slightly hairy. I've operated a World War II Enigma code machine. I've driven across the USA in actually several times on various vehicles. I've trekked across the Himalayas. I've flown in the cockpit of Concorde. Didn't have control of it, but I did fly in it. Across the North Sea in a replica Viking longboat. And I couldn't swim then either. There's a pattern emerging here. Because the last one is that I got catapulted off the flight deck of a nuclear aircraft carrier in the Atlantic. And guess what? I couldn't swim then either, but it was still good fun. once I'd been doing that for quite a long time, I suddenly came to think, like we all do, that the other person's grass is always greener, and I decided I wanted to leave documentary. I wanted to go and do something that was really, really glamorous. I wanted to work in drama. So I just banged on an awful lot of doors until eventually somebody let me in. And they let me into a very, very, very cheap soap opera, which was called London Bridge, which nobody will have ever heard of, thank goodness. And I worked on London Bridge for 2 years. I thought it was going to be really, really glamorous. I ended up in the East End on London Bridge, working in the same place every single day of my life. And we have little things called synopses that we work to. You have a thing called a call sheet, which tells you what you're going to do during the day. It gives you a list of all the scenes that you're going to shoot. And London Bridge was quite a kind of cynical programme. And it was a bit of a factory. We stamped them out quite quickly. My favourite synopsis was about some star-crossed lovers in London Bridge. We looked it up and it said, okay, what are you going to do today? Episode 526, scene 17, on a boat on the Thames. Freddie is going to take his new girlfriend, who has saved him and made him a decent person after he was a horrible person, out on a nighttime cruise. They're going to declare their love for each other. But unfortunately, like those soap operas always have, she had a terrible fatal disease. So she died in his arms. And the synopsis read, Sally dies, Freddie cries, ratings rise. And I thought, fantastic, I've really joined the business now. This is where I want to be. I made all kinds of horrific mistakes on London Bridge and on the jobs that I did afterwards. And that's because I hadn't gone to somewhere like the NFTS. I learnt on the job. And I really, really wish now that I'd gone to the NFTS, which did exist at the time, and then maybe I wouldn't have made quite such horrible mistakes. Anyway, after that, I wanted to go and do better and bigger things. Remember that most of the people that do what I do are what we call freelance, or self-employed. We work for ourselves. So I managed to get myself a bit of a reputation. I stopped making some of the really horrific mistakes, and I went on to bigger things. I'm not going to say better, but I certainly went on to bigger things. And I ended up recording a show called Waking the Dead, which is a police procedural show. It's about cold cases. I looked myself up on IMDb. You can do it. Something I'm quite proud of is that I'm actually the first Simon Clarke on IMDb, which is quite nice, really. And I discover that I recorded 79 episodes of Waking the Dead over 8 years. And each episode is 1 hour long. So if you were stupid enough, you could actually sit there for 3 days and 4 hours, end to end, and watch all the Waking the Deads that I did. I really wouldn't recommend it. None of it makes sense, because we used to make the script up as we went along. But that just illustrates that you can go on as a freelance in the film and television world. If you can do the job and you have the drive, you can actually go on, you can do more and more and more and more. I have ended up then going on to work on an awful lot of what we call high-end television drama. And that's the sort of culmination of that is a job called Wolf Hall, which was transmitted, I think, 1.5 years ago now, or 2 years ago. And I've got one of those rather beautiful statuettes, which is called a BAFTA, which I got for doing that. And then I ended up working at the film school. So there you go. The thing that I find about a film crew is that when you're working for a film crew, I guess most of you think that working in a film crew, life as a film crew member, is a constant round of sort of, casual sex, enormous amounts of money, implausible amounts of Class A abuse, and hobnobbing with glamorous film stars. So I'm here now to tell you that that's only part of what it actually is. It's an awful lot of hard work. It's an awful lot of thinking on your feet. It's an awful lot of being your own boss. Don't just do what people told you to do. The illustration I can give you of that actually worked for me, and I'm sorry this sounds like name dropping. I did a job called In Bed with Madonna. It was a great big documentary about Madonna's Blonde Ambition tour in 1990. I got parachuted in to do the European leg of that. They'd done the American bit. And I was one of 8 sound recordists on that job. And when I turned up on the job, they gave me an A4 sheet of paper, not dissimilar to this, with printing on it, not dissimilar to this. And it told me all the things that they didn't want me to do and all the things that they did want me to do, which had been written by somebody with blue skin in an air-conditioned room in front of a screen, because of the way that they thought it should be done, and also because they came from the music world. I lasted 2 days doing that, and I realised I wasn't actually getting the sound that way. It just wasn't possible. Never mind why, but it was all to do with directional mics and bass cuts and things like that. So 2 days in, and the director says, okay, we need, Madonna's going to be in a car, and she might say something interesting, but we can't put a sound recordist in there, and this. And I said, no, me, sir. And he didn't even know my name at that time, and he said, well, go on, yeah, the English sound recordist, what do you want? And I said, well, look, here's this thing. I've got a spare tape recorder with me. I can put that in the car. I can wire the car up for sound. I can put microphones in the roof. I can put a microphone on the seat next to where she is, because she wouldn't wear a radio microphone. I said, that's fine. I can press go when the car leaves. I can get in another car, meet it at the other end, turn it off, and at the same time I can then meet it, pick her up on another mic and all this kind of thing. He looked at me, he said, you know, you are the first person from the sound department who's spoken to me in 2.5 months that we've been making this film. I was very proud of the fact that I'd made him like me. The slightly dodgy thing was they then sacked all the other sound recordists and kept me, and I had to do the job on my own for the rest of the European tour, which is quite fun. Slightly worried about the fact that we're in a church. I'm slightly worried about the fact that there are 8 cameras looking at us, because I have got a story about Madonna that I just can't tell you. I've also got a load here. I've got a story about Jonathan Pryce, which I don't think I can tell you, Mark Rylance, which I definitely can't tell you, Helena Bonham Carter, I can't tell you, Trevor Eve, I can't tell you, David Hemmings, I can't tell you, Al Pacino, I can't tell you, Martin Clunes, I can't tell you. Maxine Peake doesn't like microphones. She plays ping pong with them. You've seen the boom microphone that goes in front of people like that. Maxine Peake, in the middle of Silks, suddenly decided she'd never seen one before, so she's giving a speech, and she's actually behind a lectern a bit like this, and she's being a lawyer, and she forgot her lines, so she decided the thing was putting her off with the microphone, so she went like that. What's that thing doing here? So it's been there for around about 2 months, hon, but never mind. Ben Miller, there's a nice story about Ben Miller. I did a show called Death in Paradise, which we shoot in Guadeloupe. And it's a bit of a nonsensy program. It's fun, but it's not great telly. Ben used to play the lead in it. He's a very, very nice man. However, he's the most unlikely person to put on a tropical island or a subtropical island because he suffers from heat exhaustion very, very, very quickly. The humidity on Guadeloupe is around about 95%, and the temperature is usually between 37 and 40. When you stand there with the tape recorder over your arm, with a recorder over your shoulder or whatever, you literally feel a waterfall of sweat going down your back. And Ben's supposed to play this very uptight British detective who's been sent out there. Now, if you ever watched it, you will see that he wears a suit and tie all the time. And he's quite all right in it, and he doesn't look as if he's sweating or what have you. What I can tell you is that the suit and tie isn't really a suit and tie, it's just a jacket, and the shirt is actually just a collar, doesn't have a back, it just has a little bit of a front there so that you can actually, looks like it's got a shirt on. And it has a quick release on it. It's Velcro. So basically what Ben used to do, he'd go in, he'd do a scene, and he'd usually last for around about 3 minutes, 30 seconds. Then he'd overheat. Then he'd forget his lines. Then he'd get cross. And then he would just go, vroom, like Superman. He'd tear this stuff off. And then he would just run down the road into an air-conditioned car where he would sit for half an hour until we could start filming with him now. I'm allowed to tell that one. That's not really... are there any others? It's a shame, really. No, talk to me afterwards about Damian Lewis. That's quite fun. So the thing is, we are all storytellers. That is what we do for a living, and I would encourage anybody who has any kind of sense of wanting to be in visual arts, don't just think about being a director or being a camera person or being even a script writer, although script writers are wonderful people. Just think about the fact that recording what people say in order for it to be played back and communicated to other people is a fairly tricky thing. You can remain stoically cheerful when you're doing it. And pictures without sound went out in 1928 when The Jazz Singer came out, and we put sound on it. Sound without pictures is radio, and it's still going. I'd like to just end with two things, really. One is you're probably wondering what that's about. I'll tell you in a minute. But I'll just say there's a definition of a sound recordist, which I quite like. And you can use this for all kinds of situations. It's about a guy in a hot air balloon. And a man in a hot air balloon realizes that he's lost. So he reduces his altitude and he spots somebody below him. He descends a bit more and he shouts, "Excuse me, can you help me? I promised a friend I'd meet him here an hour ago, but I don't know where I am." So the guy below says, "You're in a hot air balloon. You're hovering approximately 30 feet above the ground. You're between 40 and 41 degrees north latitude and between 59 and 60 degrees west longitude." The guy in the balloon says, "Aha, you must be a production sound recordist." And the fellow says, "Yeah, I am. How do you know?" And he says, "Well, everything you told me is technically correct, but I've still got no idea what to make of your information. The fact is, I'm still lost, and frankly, you haven't been any help." And the guy below says, "You've got to be a film producer." And he says, "I am. How do you know that?" And he says, "Well, you don't know where you are. You don't know where you're going. You've risen to where you are on a large quantity of hot air. You made a promise you've got no idea how to keep, and you expect me to solve your problem. The fact is, you're in exactly the same position you were in before we met, but somehow now it's my fault." It's something that we tend to feel. And then the last thing is to tell you, we all bring props with us. So when I was doing documentaries and going all the way around the world and meeting all these lovely people and seeing all these extraordinary things and gaining an education, I always had one of these with me. And you've probably seen these. You see them at the sides of football grounds, and when somebody's doing the news, usually one of these pops in like that or like that, what have you. And we carry them with us all the time, and they're usually on a thing called a boom pole, so that we can actually hang them out over you so we can see what we're doing. And then you get a booming shot. Look, that's a virtual reality booming shot. That'll freak them out. So I went round the world carrying one of these, and I'm not a great linguist. I speak a little bit of French. My mother is German. I've got a smattering of German. But the rest of the places in the world that I went to didn't understand a word they were saying. But I always knew one phrase. I always knew that whenever somebody pointed and mouthed something in a language that I didn't understand, he was saying, "Look at the bearded idiot with a dead cat on a stick." Thank you very much.